Hello my little shoe buns, I'm Sam, and if you, like myself, have spent any time on the internet lately, you are probably aware of the phenomena of RPG horror stories. Bad things that have happened to people when they're playing D&D or other TTRPGs, because it turns out that a lot of people are holes. So today I want to talk about ways that you as a DM or as a player talking to your DM can prevent this from happening. I'm going to be going through the safety tools which I use whenever I am running a game, which also happen to be, for the most part, the same safety tools which Roll Together RPG use. So let's pour out a brew and get to it. Once you have your players who have agreed to play in your game with you, you're probably going to be thinking about the setting which their characters are going to fit into. But before you've actually come up with your setting, a very sensible thing to do is to establish what your players are comfortable with. Best way to do that is to use the TTRPG Safety Toolkit, which was based on the Monty Cook Gaming Consent in Gaming Guide. But the purpose of this is to work out what topics are out of bounds, what topics are inbounds, or if you're aware of the terminology, lines and veils, to establish those. A line is something which you are not going to cross at any time in your game, something completely off limits. And a veil is something that players are comfortable happening, but they would rather that it happens behind closed doors. Now, to some people, this might seem like it's a little bit over the top, but regardless of whether you think that is the case or not, this is a very effective way to establish whether your world that you want to run and the players who have agreed to play in it are going to work together, because there is nothing worse than getting 3 sessions into a campaign and then having to completely rewrite it because it's just not working. So once you've got your safety checklist, the next thing to do is to arrange a session 0 so you can discuss that information. What I tend to do is before session 0, I give out information about what the world is like, where the adventure is taking place, a few character archetypes which might fit into the setting to provide players some guidance, and then also some information generally that the characters might know. It allows you to do a start point a bit more like something like Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, where you're throwing your characters and players into the action, rather than Skyrim, where you're sitting in the back of a cart for 20 minutes hearing lore. When you actually sit down to run your session 0, you're just going to recap some of this information, and then actually I find it's quite useful to let your players lead. Let them talk about their character backstories that they've already developed, and it lets them start to bounce ideas off one another. It allows your players to tie their stories together rather than being a group of 5 adventurers who just through pure happenstance have come together. It also lets you as a DM gather that information and tie their stories into those story beats that you've already come up with. And then once you've done that, you can establish the lines which are not going to be crossed during your campaign. If a player is really uncomfortable with that, they deeply care about being able to talk to NPCs, then you're establishing to them that this is not the game that they want to be playing in. At the end of the day, it's just really important to remember that the information you've been given has only been given to you, and therefore it's your responsibility to disseminate it to your players anonymously. This should establish your game as a safe place for those people who have decided to play in it. But there's 2 pieces of advice that I tend to use and give when it comes to actually playing a game. The first of those is the implementation of what we at Roll Together call pause cards, a way for you to stop the action, take a step back. If something happens, you can then discuss about what's come up and work out how you want to go from there, whether you'd rather skip it, have it happen behind closed doors, or reset, go back a few moments and replay through that scenario without that issue, that topic that's come up. It's a way to allow your players and other people to check in on one another, because while people have established what they're comfortable with in that initial checklist, these things can change over time. And the final thing is that as a DM, you need to remember that it is your world. Anything which is completely off colour or is making people obviously uncomfortable can be prevented. You just stop it. You can either just say no to your players, fudge some dice rolls to make sure they fail at what they're doing, and then have a conversation later on the side, or you can take a timeout and let people walk away, work out what people are uncomfortable with, and then come back. You don't have to let a player run rampant, and it is your responsibility to make sure everyone's enjoying themselves, unless they're trying to enjoy themselves at the expense of someone else, in which case they're in, and you can kick them out of your game immediately. Anyway, I will be back next week to talk about something or other, hopefully something gamey, but we are still in the drought season, and I just need something to come up to inspire me, please. Please. See you next week.